Hello, everyone, and welcome to the English Globe. I'm Adam, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today. I hope you're all feeling great and ready for a wonderful conversation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julia, and I am so excited to spend this time with you. Today, we're going to dive into a very special topic that has inspired millions of people around the world. We'll be talking about Steve Jobs, the man who is often called the genius behind the technology we use every day, especially Apple.
That's right, Julia. Steve Jobs is one of the most well-known figures in the world of technology, and he played a huge role in making Apple what it is today. But his story is not just about business. It's about vision, creativity, and how believing in yourself can lead to amazing things. So if you've ever used an iPhone or a Mac, or even if you've just heard the name Apple, this story will really interest you.
Exactly. We're going to take a closer look at Steve Jobs' journey, how he started Apple, faced challenges, and eventually changed the way we live with his incredible products. And don't worry if English isn't your first language. We're going to make sure to explain everything in simple English, and we'll be speaking slowly so that everyone can follow along easily.
Exactly. We want this to be a fun and educational experience for everyone, no matter where you are on your English learning journey. So, whether you're just starting to learn English or you're already more advanced, you're going to enjoy this conversation. We're going to cover a lot of exciting topics, from the rise of Apple to the challenges Steve Jobs faced, and of course, the amazing technology he helped create.
That's right. And it's not just about success and technology. We'll also talk about the lessons Steve Jobs taught us through his life. His story is about dreaming big, overcoming difficulties, and making a lasting impact on the world. So grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and get ready for a long but exciting conversation about technology, innovation, and success. Yes, and remember, this is going to be a longer podcast, so take your time and feel free to listen to it again if you want to catch all the details. It's going to be a fantastic learning experience, and we're really excited to share it with you.
Absolutely. So let's begin this journey into the world of Steve Jobs and the rise of Apple. Trust me, you're going to enjoy it. All right, let's take a step back and talk about where it all began for Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was born on February 24th, 1955, in a city called San Francisco, which is in California, USA. His birth was actually a very special and unique moment because Steve Jobs was adopted right after he was born. His biological parents were a young couple, and they decided they were not able to care for him. So, he was adopted by a couple named Paul and Clara Jobs.
That's right, Adam. And even though Steve was adopted, he grew up in a very loving and supportive family. His adoptive parents, Paul and Clara, took excellent care of him and made sure he had everything he needed to succeed in life. They were very kind and worked hard to provide a good home for him. And even though they were not rich, they supported his education and his growing interests. Paul Jobs, Steve's adoptive father, was a mechanic, and he loved to work on electronics. It was actually Paul who first introduced Steve to the world of technology.
Steve Jobs had a very interesting childhood. From a very young age, he showed a deep curiosity and a strong desire to learn about how things worked. In fact, his curiosity was one of the most important parts of his personality that would later help him become such a successful inventor and entrepreneur. He was always asking questions and trying to understand the world around him, whether it was the way machines worked, how radios were put together, or how to fix things. Steve wanted to know everything he could about the tools and technology in his world.
Absolutely, Adam. And what's fascinating is that Steve was not just curious, he was incredibly smart. From a young age, he showed a natural talent for understanding complex ideas. He didn't just want to know how things worked, he wanted to create and improve them. For example, when he was just a teenager, Steve spent a lot of time at his father's workshop, learning how to build and repair electronics. It wasn't long before he started to realize that he had a special skill for solving problems and thinking about things in new ways.
That's right. And even though Steve Jobs didn't always love school, he was still a very intelligent kid. He did well in certain subjects, especially in science and math, but he didn't always fit in with the traditional school system. He was known for being a little rebellious and didn't always follow the rules, which made it difficult for him to connect with some of his teachers. But this didn't stop him. In fact, Steve's rebellious nature and his ability to think outside the box were part of what made him so unique and different from everyone else.
Yes, Steve's curiosity was one of the key traits that would shape his future. As a child, he was not only interested in technology, but he was also a very creative person. He loved to read books about different subjects, and he had a strong interest in art and design. Even though his childhood was filled with both ups and downs, these early experiences of learning, exploring, and being curious helped form the foundation of his future success.
One of the interesting things about Steve's early life is that, while he didn't always enjoy school, he was always looking for ways to learn in his own way. He didn't always wait for teachers to tell him what to do. Instead, he went out and found things that interested him. For example, he loved to take things apart, like radios and televisions, just to see how they worked. And this hands-on approach to learning was something that stayed with him throughout his life. He didn't just want to sit in a classroom. He wanted to get his hands dirty and build something new.
And this love for building things didn't stop when he was a child. Even in his teenage years, Steve Jobs continued to explore his creativity and learn by doing. He was the kind of person who didn't just accept things as they were. He always thought, how can I make this better? How can I improve this? How can I create something new? This kind of thinking would later lead him to the incredible ideas and innovations that would change the world.
Exactly. So even though Steve Jobs' early years weren't perfect, and even though he wasn't always a traditional student, his early life laid the groundwork for his incredible journey. His curiosity, intelligence, and natural talent for building and understanding things set him on a path that would eventually lead to the creation of Apple, one of the most influential companies in the world.
Yes, and when you look back at Steve Jobs' early years, you can see how everything came together. His family, his curiosity, his smart mind, and his love for creativity all played important roles in shaping who he would become. Steve Jobs wasn't just a regular kid. He was a dreamer and a doer from the very beginning, and that's what made him so special.
Now, let's move on to one of the most exciting parts of Steve Jobs' story, the beginning of Apple. It all started when Steve Jobs was just a young man, still figuring out what he wanted to do with his life, and this is where we meet an important person in Steve's life, Steve Wozniak. Wozniak, or Woz as people like to call him, was a brilliant engineer and a big fan of electronics and computers. He was someone who loved to build things, and he had an incredible talent for designing and creating new technology. The two of them met through a mutual friend when Steve was only about 19 years old, and from that very first meeting, they started talking about their shared love for technology.
The connection between Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak was immediate. They had a lot in common. Both of them loved to tinker with electronics, and both of them were incredibly passionate about creating new things. But while Wozniak was the one who had the technical knowledge and the ability to design complicated circuits and systems, Steve Jobs had a very different skill. Steve Jobs was a visionary. He had the ability to see the big picture. He could understand what people wanted, even before they knew it themselves. So, while Wozniak could build the machines, Jobs knew how to take those machines and turn them into something that could change the world.
And that's when the idea of building computers came up. Wozniak had already designed a personal computer, a machine that was much smaller and more affordable than the computers that existed at that time, which were huge and very expensive. But Wozniak didn't really have the business skills or the ability to sell his design to the public. That's where Steve Jobs came in. Jobs saw the potential in Wozniak's design, and he immediately knew that they could create something big if they worked together. But rather than just stopping at the idea of building a computer, Jobs knew they needed to think bigger. He wanted to make a product that ordinary people could use, not just people who were experts in technology. This was a revolutionary idea.
So, with that idea in mind, Jobs and Wozniak started working together. They didn't have a big office or a lot of money or fancy equipment, but they had something more important: determination. They decided to build their computers in Jobs' family garage, a small, simple space that would soon become the birthplace of one of the most successful companies in the world. It was in this small garage, with very limited resources, that the first Apple computers were built. They worked day and night, carefully putting together the pieces of the computers, testing their designs, and figuring out how to make everything work just right.
Can you imagine? A small garage, a few young guys, and a dream. That's how it all started. Jobs and Wozniak spent countless hours working in that cramped space, building the first prototypes of what would become the Apple I computer. There was no money for expensive tools or equipment, so they had to get creative. They even sold some of their personal items to raise money for the parts they needed. But despite all the challenges, they never gave up. They believed in their idea, and they knew they were onto something big. And as they built the first computers, they realized that they were not just making a product. They were creating a whole new world of possibilities for personal computing.
Absolutely, Adam. And here's where it gets even more interesting. After working for months in the garage, Jobs and Wozniak finished the first version of their computer, and they realized they needed to sell it to make their dream a reality. They didn't have the money to mass-produce the computers, so they decided to take a huge risk. Steve Jobs went out and started talking to local electronics stores, trying to convince them to buy the computers they had built. At first, people didn't take them seriously. After all, they were just two young guys with no experience and a computer that looked a bit strange. But Jobs was persistent. He kept pushing, he kept talking, and eventually, he found someone who believed in their idea.
That's right. And in 1976, after getting a small order from a local store, they were able to build and sell their first batch of computers. This was the beginning of Apple. They officially started the company in April 1976, right there in the garage, and they called it Apple Computer Inc. The name Apple came from Steve Jobs, who loved apples and thought the name sounded friendly and simple. It was a name that would soon become famous around the world.
Yes, the beginning of Apple wasn't just about technology. It was about vision, risk-taking, and thinking differently. Jobs and Wozniak didn't follow the traditional rules of business. They weren't just building a computer, they were building a new way of thinking about technology. And even though they started from nothing, their passion and belief in their idea helped them turn Apple into the company we know today.
So from a small garage with a lot of hard work and a dream to change the world, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak started the journey of creating Apple. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of an incredible story, a story that would change not only their lives, but the lives of millions of people around the world. And even though they faced many challenges along the way, they never gave up on their vision, and that's what makes their story so inspiring. Now, let's talk about how Apple's early journey was filled with both incredible successes and major challenges. After Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak worked tirelessly in that small garage to create the first Apple I, they were excited to see it finally come to life. The Apple I was a simple computer compared to today's standards, but it was a groundbreaking product for its time. It was the first affordable personal computer that was ready to use right out of the box. People who saw it couldn't believe how small and user-friendly it was, especially compared to the big, expensive computers that filled entire rooms. The Apple I changed the way people thought about technology and how it could fit into their homes.
Exactly, Adam. And the early success of the Apple I was a huge step for the company. People started taking notice of this little computer that came with everything. No need to buy separate parts like keyboards or monitors. It wasn't just another machine. It was a product that made personal computing possible for everyone, not just big corporations or experts in technology. The Apple I sold in small numbers, but it made a big impact. The first batch sold well enough to give Steve Jobs and Wozniak the funds they needed to take their business to the next level. They were ready to make the next big move.
That's right. After the success of the Apple I, Jobs and Wozniak wanted to do something even bigger. They started working on the Apple II, which would later become one of the most successful computers ever made. The Apple II was completely different from the Apple I. It had a built-in color graphics display, which was revolutionary at the time, and it was designed for both business and personal use. The Apple II was a product that people could actually see as a real tool for their everyday lives, whether they were at home or at work. This was the moment that Apple began to grow rapidly.
The Apple II became a huge hit. It sold millions of units and quickly put Apple on the map as one of the leading tech companies in the world. People were amazed at the power and capabilities of the Apple II, and it was in many ways the first computer that was accessible to regular consumers. By the late 1970s, Apple had gone from being a small startup in a garage to a company worth millions of dollars. But with all this success came new challenges, and things were starting to get more complicated for Apple.
Yes, while Apple's success with the Apple II was impressive, it wasn't all smooth sailing. As the company grew, so did the pressure. Steve Jobs, as the leader of the company, was facing more responsibility, and this led to increasing tensions inside Apple. Steve Jobs had a very strong personality, and he was known for being incredibly driven, but also for being difficult to work with at times. His vision for the company was clear, and he wanted everything to be perfect. But this often led to conflict with other members of the team, especially when it came to the direction Apple should take. As the company continued to expand, Steve found himself facing more and more problems with managing the team, and his intense desire to control every detail of
That's right. One of the major issues was that while Steve Jobs was a visionary, he wasn't always great at handling the business side of things. Apple's growth meant that they needed a lot of money to continue expanding, and that created a lot of pressure to keep up with demand and competition. Some of the early investors and board members at Apple started to feel that Jobs was becoming too difficult to work with, and they weren't sure if his leadership style was the best for the company's future. Jobs was very focused on perfection, and that sometimes led to arguments and frustrations, especially as the company tried to take on bigger projects. For example, Steve Jobs didn't just want to build a computer. He wanted to make a revolution in how people used technology. His dream for Apple was to create beautiful products that could change the world. But not everyone in the company shared his vision or was willing to work with him in the same intense way.
This tension started to show when Apple began working on the next big project, the Macintosh. The Macintosh was going to be their first personal computer with a graphical user interface, or GUI, which was a completely new way of interacting with a computer. Unlike the traditional command line interface that most computers used at the time, the GUI allowed people to use icons and a mouse to interact with the computer. This was going to be a game changer. Steve Jobs was deeply passionate about making the Macintosh a success. He wanted it to be beautiful, intuitive, and easy to use, something that would appeal to everyday people, not just tech enthusiasts.
Exactly. And the Macintosh was a project that Steve Jobs put his heart and soul into. He was so focused on making it perfect that he pushed his team to work incredibly hard, sometimes pushing them too hard. There were many moments when tensions boiled over during the development of the Macintosh. Jobs' demanding nature led to arguments, and some of the people working on the project felt frustrated with his constant drive for perfection. Even though the Macintosh was groundbreaking in many ways, its development was a difficult process, and not everyone inside Apple agreed on how to bring it to life.
And then, in 1985, the situation at Apple reached a breaking point. Steve Jobs, despite all his vision and passion for the company, was forced out of Apple by the board of directors. The decision came after months of rising tension between Jobs and the other executives. While Jobs had been instrumental in creating the company's success, his leadership style and the conflicts that arose from it had started to take a toll. The board felt that Jobs' approach was too risky, and they were concerned about the direction he was taking Apple. So, despite all his hard work, Steve Jobs was no longer in charge of the company he had created.
It was a huge turning point in the story of Apple. Imagine, the man who had founded the company, the visionary who had built Apple from the ground up, was now no longer with the company. It must have been a very strange and difficult time for everyone involved. Steve Jobs had to leave, but he wasn't done with technology just yet. After leaving Apple, he went on to create a new company called Next, which focused on making computers for education and business. Next didn't have the same level of success as Apple, but it was an important chapter in Jobs' career.
And Jobs didn't just stop there. He also purchased a small animation company called Pixar, which, as we all know, went on to become one of the most successful animation studios in the world, producing movies like Toy Story and Finding Nemo. So, even though Steve Jobs was no longer at Apple, he was still shaping the future of technology and entertainment in big ways.
Yes, and eventually in 1997, Steve Jobs returned to Apple, the company he had founded. Apple was struggling at the time, and they were facing serious financial problems. But when Jobs came back, he brought with him the experience and vision that had made him so successful. He helped turn the company around, and we all know the incredible journey Apple took after that, leading to the creation of products like the iPod, iPhone, and iPad, which changed the world of technology forever.
So, the story of Apple's early success and the problems the company faced is really a story of vision, conflict, and resilience. While Steve Jobs faced many challenges and even had to leave the company he built, his journey didn't end there. The struggles he faced in those early years helped shape him into the leader he became, and ultimately, they helped Apple become the giant it is today. After Steve Jobs left Apple in 1985, his departure marked a dramatic and unexpected twist in the company's story. It was hard to imagine at the time that the man who had founded Apple, the one who had turned it into a global icon, would no longer be at the helm. However, Steve Jobs' departure from Apple wasn't the end of his story. In fact, it was only the beginning of a new chapter in his life that would be filled with both successes and lessons that would ultimately come to shape not only his future, but the future of Apple as well. After leaving Apple, Jobs went on to a completely new venture, a company he named Next. This company wasn't just another tech startup. It was Steve Jobs' attempt to create a new kind of computer for businesses and educational institutions.
Yes, and Next was different. It wasn't a personal computer aimed at the everyday user, like the Apple I or Apple II, or even the Macintosh. Instead, Jobs wanted Next to produce powerful computers designed for professionals, with advanced software and features that would help transform industries. While Next didn't become a huge commercial success in terms of sales, it did push the boundaries of technology in ways that would eventually have a significant impact. Jobs poured everything he had into Next, both financially and creatively. The computers were sleek, innovative, and powerful, but they were also expensive, making them less accessible for many people. However, in creating Next, Jobs learned important lessons about design, business, and innovation. Lessons that would later play a critical role in Apple's revival.
And during this time, something else incredible was happening. Jobs also became involved in the world of entertainment, acquiring a small animation company called Pixar in 1986. At that time, Pixar wasn't the household name it is today. It was just a small group of animators working on computer-generated graphics. But under Jobs' leadership, Pixar began to grow rapidly. The company soon revolutionized the world of animation. Pixar created Toy Story, the first full-length animated film made entirely with computer graphics. This movie was a massive success, and it changed the way people thought about animation. The success of Pixar helped Jobs expand his influence into a new realm, the entertainment industry. But more importantly, it gave him the financial backing and experience that would allow him to one day return to Apple.
Right. And while Steve Jobs was having an impact at Next and Pixar, Apple was struggling. The company was no longer the leader in the personal computer market, and its products were falling behind. Apple had a series of failed attempts at new products, and the company's stock price was plummeting. In the early 1990s, Apple's situation became more desperate. Even though Apple had experienced great success in the past, the company was now fighting to survive, and it needed something or someone to bring it back to life. In 1996, Apple decided to purchase Next for $429 million, bringing Jobs back to the company he had founded. This purchase not only brought Jobs back to Apple, but it also brought with it new technology and software that Apple desperately needed.
When Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the company was in a very different place than it had been when he first left. Apple was struggling with its identity, and there was a sense of confusion about its future. Jobs was now in his 40s, and he had a wealth of experience that he didn't have when he first founded Apple. He had seen what it took to build a successful company, and he had learned valuable lessons in design, technology, and leadership that would be crucial in revitalizing Apple. Jobs returned as the interim CEO, and from the very beginning, he made it clear that his vision for Apple was going to be bold, focused, and radically different from anything the company had tried before.
One of the first things Jobs did when he returned was streamline Apple's product line. Apple had become bloated with too many products that weren't connecting with consumers. There were too many versions of the same idea, and this made it difficult for Apple to stand out in a crowded market. Jobs made the tough decision to simplify things. He reduced the number of products Apple was working on and focused the company's efforts on just a few key projects. He realized that in order to succeed, Apple needed to focus on creating products that were not just functional, but also beautiful, intuitive, and revolutionary. Jobs believed that technology should not only work well, but should also be easy to use and aesthetically pleasing. This new approach would become the foundation for everything Apple would do in the years to come.
And that's when things really started to change for Apple. One of the first major successes under Jobs' leadership was the release of the iMac in 1998. The iMac was unlike anything anyone had seen before. It had a bold, colorful design that made it stand out from the boring, boxy computers of the time. But the iMac wasn't just about looking cool. It was also incredibly easy to use, with an all-in-one design that made it simple for anyone, even someone with no technical experience, to start using right away. The iMac became a huge success, and it helped Apple regain some of its lost reputation. People began to see Apple as a company that was not just about computers, but about creating products that were both functional and beautiful.
Absolutely. And the iMac was just the beginning. In 2001, Apple introduced another groundbreaking product, the iPod. At that time, the world was still listening to music on CD players, and digital music players were bulky and difficult to use. The iPod completely changed all of that. It was small, sleek, and had an incredible storage capacity. With the iPod, people could carry thousands of songs in their pocket. But the iPod wasn't just about technology. It was about making music accessible, personal, and enjoyable. Jobs and his team at Apple created a product that would redefine the music industry. The iPod, combined with iTunes, allowed people to buy and download music easily, and it created a revolution in the way people listened to and shared music.
The iPod's success was a game changer, but it was only a part of Jobs' larger vision. In 2007, Apple introduced the iPhone, a product that would not only change Apple, but would change the entire world. The iPhone combined a phone, an iPod, and a computer all in one device. It had a touchscreen interface, which was revolutionary at the time, and it allowed people to do things on their phones that they had never imagined before. With the iPhone, Apple didn't just create a new product, it created a new way of life. People began using their phones for everything: calling, texting, checking email, browsing the internet, and even shopping. The iPhone became a must-have device for millions of people, and it helped Apple become one of the most valuable companies in the world.
Along with the iPhone, Apple introduced the iPad in 2010. which further pushed the boundaries of personal technology. The iPad was a new kind of device, part computer, part entertainment system, part digital book reader, all wrapped into one sleek package. People loved the iPad because it was easy to use, portable and versatile. Whether you wanted to read, play games, watch movies, or work, the iPad offered a new and convenient way to do it all. The success of the iPhone and iPad made Apple the dominant force in the tech industry, and it solidified Steve Jobs' legacy as one of the most visionary and influential figures in modern technology.
Steve Jobs' return to Apple marked the beginning of a new era for the company. Under his leadership, Apple went from near bankruptcy to becoming one of the most innovative and profitable companies in the world. His vision of creating products that were not only functional but also beautiful, intuitive, and user-friendly revolutionized the tech industry. Apple became known for its groundbreaking designs and its ability to create products that people didn't just want, they needed. Jobs' legacy lives on in every Apple product, and his return to the company was one of the most important moments in the history of technology. Steve Jobs' return to Apple in the late 1990s set the stage for what can only be described as a revolution in personal technology. Before he returned, the technology world was dominated by clunky, unexciting devices that, while functional, lacked the innovation, the creativity, and the sleek designs that Steve Jobs was so passionate about. But under his leadership, Apple shifted from being a company struggling to survive into a global powerhouse. And it all began with the introduction of the iMac, which redefined what a personal computer could look like. It was colorful, it was easy to use, and it was compact, all qualities that people had never seen before in a desktop computer. This, however, was just the beginning. In 2001, Jobs and his team introduced a product that would set the stage for the future of consumer electronics, and that product was the iPod.
Yes, and the iPod didn't just change the way people listened to music, it changed the entire music industry. Before the iPod, people were still carrying around bulky CD players, or perhaps they had early digital music players that were difficult to use and lacked the storage space to hold a large music library. But the iPod made listening to music a seamless experience. It was compact, it could store thousands of songs, and it was incredibly easy to use. People loved it. Apple didn't just sell a device, they sold a new way of interacting with music. And with the iTunes Store, Apple created an ecosystem where people could easily buy, download, and organize their music, all in one place. This shift was monumental, and it set the stage for everything that would follow.
Then, in 2007, Apple launched what would become its most iconic product, the iPhone. The iPhone was nothing short of revolutionary. Before the iPhone, mobile phones were mostly about calling and texting. Some phones had limited features like a camera or a simple internet browser, but nothing was quite like the iPhone. Jobs and his team combined several devices into one sleek, easy-to-use product. The iPhone wasn't just a phone. It was an iPod, a camera, a computer, and a communication device all rolled into one. The defining feature of the iPhone was the touchscreen, which completely changed how we interacted with mobile devices. No more buttons, no more complicated menus, just swipe, tap, and pinch. It was intuitive, user-friendly, and instantly addictive.
Exactly. And what's even more amazing is that the iPhone didn't just change the way we use phones. It changed the way we interacted with the world. The iPhone brought the internet to our fingertips, allowing people to access information, communicate with others, shop, play games, and do everything in between, all from one small device. It wasn't just about making phone calls anymore. The iPhone became the gateway to the entire digital world, and it did it in a way that was simple, sleek, and elegant. In fact, the iPhone became such an essential part of daily life that it's hard to imagine a world without it. It became a tool that nearly everyone, regardless of age, background, or location, could use to connect to the world in new ways.
Jobs didn't stop there. In 2010, Apple launched the iPad, a device that would change the way we interact with computers, entertainment, and even education. The iPad was essentially a tablet, a device that was smaller than a laptop, but larger than a smartphone. It combined the best of both worlds, the portability of a phone with the power and functionality of a computer. People quickly realized how useful the iPad could be for everything, from browsing the web to watching movies, reading books, playing games, and even doing work. What made the iPad so special was the seamless integration of Apple's software and hardware. The experience of using the iPad was unlike anything that had come before it.
And let's not forget the impact Apple had on how we consume content. The iPhone and iPad opened the door for apps to become a major part of our lives. The App Store, which was launched in 2008, gave developers the opportunity to create millions of apps that would change the way people communicated, shopped, exercised, learned, and entertained themselves. The App Store made it possible for anyone, from professional developers to hobbyists, to create something that could be shared with the world. Apps became a global phenomenon, and they allowed Apple to create an entire ecosystem of products and services that work together seamlessly.
Exactly. The iPhone and iPad made people rethink what was possible with technology. Apple didn't just make tools, they made products that were about more than just functionality. They were about improving the lives of their users in ways they had never imagined. People began using their phones for everything. They could take photos, check their emails, send text messages, stream music, navigate the world with GPS, and even use social media platforms. The introduction of the iPhone in particular marked the beginning of the mobile-first world we live in today. Businesses, services, and entire industries began to adapt to this new mobile-centric world. In many ways, Steve Jobs had anticipated what the future of technology would look like, and with the iPhone, he made that future a reality.
And while Apple's impact on the phone and computing industries is massive, we can't overlook the profound influence it has had on design. One of Steve Jobs' core beliefs was that technology should not just be functional, it should also be beautiful. The iPhone, the iPad, and every Apple product released under his leadership was designed with elegance and simplicity in mind. The clean lines, the minimalist interfaces, and the sleek materials all reflected Jobs' philosophy that form and function should go hand in hand. People weren't just buying products from Apple, they were buying an experience that combined cutting-edge technology with thoughtful, beautiful design.
And this philosophy has had a ripple effect throughout the entire tech industry. Companies everywhere now put a greater emphasis on the look and feel of their products. They understand that people want more than just a functional device. They want something that will be a pleasure to use, that will make their lives easier and more enjoyable. Jobs and Apple were pioneers in this regard, and their influence can be seen in nearly every tech product on the market today.
Indeed, Apple's success wasn't just about creating better devices. It was about creating an entire ecosystem that tied everything together. Apple's operating systems, such as iOS and macOS, became the backbone for their devices, offering a unified experience that made using Apple products intuitive and seamless. Whether you were using an iPhone, an iPad, or a Mac, the interface and design language felt familiar and easy to navigate. This was part of Jobs' vision of creating an integrated world where hardware, software, and services all worked in harmony. And this focus on the user experience was a key factor in Apple's rise to become one of the biggest companies in the world.
By the time Steve Jobs passed away in 2011, Apple had become a global leader in consumer technology, known not only for its innovation, but also for its ability to shape the way people interacted with the world around them. The iPhone, iPad, and iPod had changed everything. Apple's products were now essential tools in daily life, and the company had transformed industries far beyond technology, from music to entertainment, from retail to communication. Jobs had succeeded in creating products that were not just tools, but cultural icons.
Steve Jobs didn't just change technology, he changed how we think about technology, how we use it, and how we interact with the world through it. Apple became more than just a company, it became a cultural force. The products Jobs created weren't just about innovation for innovation's sake. They were about making technology personal, accessible, and meaningful. They were about creating a deeper connection between people and their devices. A connection that made their lives better, more productive, and more enjoyable.
And Apple's journey didn't stop with Jobs. The company continued to grow and innovate, building on the foundation that he laid. But it's clear that Steve Jobs' vision, his relentless pursuit of excellence, and his understanding of what technology could truly mean to people was at the heart of everything Apple became. And that's how Apple, under his guidance, went from being just another tech company to one of the most influential and valuable companies the world has ever known. Steve Jobs is often remembered for his extraordinary innovations and the way he revolutionized industries such as technology, music, and entertainment. But beyond the products he created, there are countless lessons we can learn from his life, his struggles, and his incredible journey. One of the most prominent lessons Steve Jobs taught us is the importance of hard work and following our dreams, no matter how difficult the journey may seem. His path to success was not a smooth one. In fact, it was filled with challenges, setbacks, and moments of uncertainty. Jobs' story reminds us that achieving greatness is never easy, but it's the hard work, the perseverance, and the unwavering belief in oneself that ultimately leads to success. Despite the challenges he faced, from being ousted from the company he co-founded to dealing with personal and professional setbacks, Jobs never gave up on his vision. He continued to push forward, focusing on his goals and believing in the power of his ideas. His journey teaches us that when you have a clear vision and a passion for what you do, even the hardest obstacles can be overcome with determination and hard work.
That's such an important point, Adam. Steve Jobs really understood that believing in yourself is one of the most essential keys to achieving success. There were countless moments in his life when many people doubted his ideas, questioned his methods, and even thought that he was too difficult to work with. Yet, despite all of this, Jobs always had confidence in his abilities and in the ideas he was passionate about. He understood that success isn't guaranteed and that not everyone will support your journey, but believing in yourself, trusting your instincts, and staying committed to your goals are the foundations of true success. In fact, one of Steve Jobs' most famous quotes reflects this. Your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. This quote encapsulates his belief that passion and dedication are essential to producing work that matters. It's not just about the result, but about the joy of the journey. About doing work that feels meaningful to you, regardless of the external rewards or recognition.
That's such a powerful quote, and it speaks to something that is often overlooked, the importance of loving what you do. Steve Jobs didn't just want to make products. He wanted to create experiences, to change the way people interacted with technology, and to build something that would leave a lasting impact on the world. He didn't settle for mediocrity, and he didn't settle for just doing something because it was easy. He worked tirelessly to create products that were not only functional, but beautiful, intuitive, and life-changing. Jobs believed in the idea of perfection, but not in the sense of perfectionism for perfection's sake. For him, perfection meant creating something that solved problems in a way that was innovative, simple, and impactful. It was this relentless pursuit of excellence that defined his career and set him apart from others in the tech industry.
And that's what makes his story so inspiring. Jobs taught us that achieving greatness requires an unwavering commitment to excellence, but it also requires the ability to accept and learn from failure. We all know that Steve Jobs was fired from Apple, the very company he co-founded, and it was a painful experience for him. But instead of seeing it as the end of his career, Jobs saw it as an opportunity to learn, grow, and reinvent himself. He took time to reflect on what had gone wrong and use those lessons to fuel his future success. This is another valuable lesson. Failure is not the end. It's part of the process. Failure doesn't define us, but how we respond to it does. Jobs' ability to reinvent himself and come back stronger than ever is one of the most remarkable aspects of his career. After leaving Apple, he went on to found Next, which was eventually acquired by Apple, and he also helped to transform Pixar into one of the most successful animation studios in the world.
Absolutely. His return to Apple, after being away for over a decade, was nothing short of extraordinary. It's one of the best examples of how failure can be the catalyst for growth. Jobs didn't let his setbacks define him or dictate his future. Instead, he used those experiences to sharpen his vision and refine his approach to business and technology. When he returned to Apple, the company was struggling, but Steve Jobs quickly revitalized the brand with his vision and leadership. Under his guidance, Apple not only survived, but thrived, introducing products like the iMac, the iPhone, and the iPad, products that would go on to transform the world. Jobs taught us that setbacks are temporary, but how we use them to fuel our next move can lead to remarkable achievements.
And this brings us to another lesson that Steve Jobs imparted to the world: the importance of thinking differently and being willing to take risks. Jobs wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo, and he encouraged those around him to do the same. He understood that innovation doesn't happen by following the crowd. It happens by thinking outside the box, by questioning the way things have always been done, and by imagining a future that hasn't yet been realized. One of his famous quotes captures this idea perfectly: "The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do." Jobs truly believed that if you have a bold vision and the courage to follow it, you can change the world. He wasn't interested in following the trends or doing things just because they had been done before. He wanted to create something new, something that would have a profound impact on people's lives.
That's the essence of innovation, isn't it? It's about stepping away from the ordinary and daring to dream big. Steve Jobs always believed that if you wanted to create something truly revolutionary, you had to be willing to break the rules and go against conventional wisdom. Apple's success came not from simply improving on what others had done, but from creating entirely new categories of products that people didn't even know they needed until they experienced them. Jobs and his team at Apple didn't just think about what was possible today. They thought about what could be possible in the future. And it was this forward-thinking mindset that allowed them to build products that would change the way people lived, worked, and connected with one another.
Steve Jobs' ability to push boundaries and break through barriers is something we can all learn from. It teaches us that there's no limit to what we can achieve if we have the vision and the courage to pursue it. And perhaps one of the most important lessons we can take away from Steve Jobs' life is his insistence on the importance of creating something meaningful. He once said, "We're here to put a dent in the universe. Otherwise, why even bother?" This quote is a powerful reminder that our work should be about more than just making a profit or achieving personal success. It should be about leaving a lasting legacy, about making a difference in the world, and about contributing to something greater than ourselves. Jobs' life reminds us that we all have the potential to create something that has a lasting impact on the world, if we are willing to follow our passions and dedicate ourselves to our dreams.
Exactly, Julia. So, as we reflect on the incredible life of Steve Jobs, let's remember these valuable lessons. Believe in yourself, never give up, embrace failure as a lesson, take risks, and strive to create something meaningful. Steve Jobs didn't just build a company, he built a culture of innovation, a culture that encourages us all to think differently, to dream big, and to work tirelessly toward achieving our goals. His story is a powerful reminder that success doesn't come easily, but with passion, perseverance, and an unwavering commitment to excellence, anything is possible. Steve Jobs passed away in 2011, but his influence on the world is far from over. In fact, his legacy continues to shape the way we interact with technology today. His vision for Apple was not just about making products, it was about creating a culture of innovation, design, and simplicity that would revolutionize entire industries. When you look at Apple today, you can see that the foundation Steve Jobs laid is still very much alive. Apple is one of the most valuable companies in the world, and it continues to produce some of the most innovative products, all rooted in the principles that Jobs instilled during his leadership. But what truly sets Steve Jobs apart is that his legacy goes beyond just the technology and products he created. He transformed the way we think about design, user experience, and the intersection of technology and art.
That's absolutely right, Adam. Jobs believed that technology should be beautiful, intuitive, and easy to use. He didn't want people to just use Apple products. He wanted them to experience them. He famously said, "Design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works." And that's exactly what Apple became known for, creating products that were not only functional, but also simple, elegant, and a joy to use. Think about the iPhone or the iPad. These devices have changed the way we live, work, and communicate, all because of their incredible design and user-friendly interfaces. It was Steve Jobs' insistence on perfection in design that made Apple products stand out in a crowded marketplace. His philosophy was that every detail mattered, from the way a button felt when you pressed it to the sleekness of the device's surface.
And even beyond the design of the products themselves, Steve Jobs revolutionized the entire ecosystem of technology. He didn't just create a computer or a phone, he created a new way of thinking about technology as an integral part of our everyday lives. Jobs was obsessed with creating seamless experiences, making sure that all the parts of the system, from hardware to software, worked together effortlessly. He once said, "The system is what's important. The system includes the product, but it also includes the software, the marketing, the distribution, and everything else." Jobs understood that great technology wasn't just about the product alone. It was about creating a complete experience, an ecosystem that made the technology easier, more enjoyable, and more meaningful to use.
Steve Jobs' legacy also extends to the way we think about entrepreneurship and leadership. Jobs was known for his intense drive and his ability to push people to achieve things they never thought possible. Some people called him a perfectionist, while others said he could be difficult to work with. But what made him such a great leader was his unwavering commitment to his vision. He knew exactly what he wanted to create, and he had the courage to demand the best from everyone around him. Jobs once said, "My job is not to be easy on people. My job is to make them better." This is a reminder that great leaders challenge those they lead to grow, to push beyond their limits, and to strive for excellence even when it's uncomfortable. Steve Jobs believed that the best work was the work that stretched you, that forced you to think differently and to take risks.
And that leadership philosophy didn't stop at the people he worked with directly. Jobs' influence can be seen across the entire tech industry and beyond. He inspired countless entrepreneurs, designers, and innovators to think bigger and to approach problems in new and creative ways. Many people who worked at Apple during Jobs' tenure went on to found other successful companies, creating a ripple effect that has changed the tech landscape forever. His leadership style, while controversial at times, helped to foster a culture of excellence that continues to influence the way businesses are run today.
Another part of Steve Jobs' legacy is how he changed the way we consume and interact with media. With the launch of the iTunes Store in 2003, Jobs revolutionized the music industry. He made it possible for people to buy individual songs instead of whole albums, which transformed the way we listen to music. Then, with the release of the iPhone and the App Store, he completely changed the way we think about software and mobile applications. The App Store created an entirely new economy, allowing developers to create and sell apps directly to consumers. These changes were nothing short of revolutionary, and they paved the way for many of the digital innovations we take for granted today, from social media to gaming to business applications.
Of course, we can't talk about Steve Jobs' legacy without mentioning his impact on the way we communicate. The iPhone, as we mentioned earlier, wasn't just a phone. It was the beginning of the smartphone era, a device that combines a phone, a camera, a computer, and so much more, all in the palm of your hand. Jobs understood that communication was about more than just making calls. The iPhone allowed people to connect with others in ways that were previously unimaginable. It changed how we stay in touch, how we work, and how we navigate the world. And it was all thanks to Jobs' vision for what a phone could be.
Steve Jobs' influence extends beyond just technology, though. He has inspired people in every field, from business to art to design. His relentless pursuit of perfection, his ability to challenge conventional thinking, and his passion for creating products that enhance people's lives has set a standard for innovation and excellence that continues to inspire new generations of entrepreneurs and creators. Even today, we see the impact of Steve Jobs in the way companies approach design, user experience, and technology. His ability to turn seemingly impossible ideas into reality has left a lasting mark on the world, and that's a legacy that will endure for years to come.
Steve Jobs truly left a dent in the universe, as he once said he would. His work, his philosophy, and his vision for a better, more connected world continue to inspire people around the globe. He wasn't just a tech entrepreneur, he was a visionary who changed the course of history. And as we look at Apple's ongoing success and the incredible products it continues to produce, we see that Steve Jobs' legacy is very much alive, influencing the world in ways we might not even fully understand yet.
Exactly, Adam. His impact on technology and design is immeasurable, and we can all learn so much from his journey. The importance of perseverance, the courage to follow our dreams, and the relentless pursuit of innovation. Steve Jobs didn't just change the tech industry. He changed the way we think about creativity, business, and what's possible. And that's why his legacy will continue to inspire and guide future generations of innovators.
Wow, what an incredible journey we've been on today. I hope you enjoyed hearing about the life of Steve Jobs and the amazing story of how Apple became one of the most innovative companies in the world. We've covered a lot of ground today, from his early life and struggles to his groundbreaking achievements and the incredible products he helped create, and of course, the legacy he left behind that continues to influence the world today. It's been such an inspiring conversation, and I truly hope it's left you feeling motivated, curious, and ready to continue pursuing your own dreams, whatever they may be. Steve Jobs taught us all that with hard work, passion, and the willingness to take risks, we can change the world. And that's a powerful lesson we can all take with us as we go forward in our lives.
Absolutely, Adam. It's been such a pleasure talking about Steve Jobs today. His story really shows us that even the most difficult challenges can lead to the greatest successes. It's also a reminder that learning never stops. Just like Steve Jobs constantly learned from his failures and successes, we should always be learning, whether it's about technology, leadership, or even improving our English. I hope that today's episode has inspired you to not only look up to the incredible legacy of Steve Jobs, but also to continue working on your own goals and learning along the way. And of course, keep practicing your English. The more you practice, the better you'll get. And who knows? Maybe you'll come up with the next big idea that changes the world. I'm excited to see how far you can go, and I'm excited to continue this journey with all of you.
That's right, Julia. Learning English is an ongoing journey, and we are here to help you every step of the way. Whether you're just starting out or looking to improve your skills, keep practicing, keep listening, and most importantly, keep speaking. The more you immerse yourself in English, the more natural it will feel. And remember, every step you take brings you closer to fluency. So, keep listening to our podcasts, watch movies, read books, and most importantly, don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's part of the learning process. Just like Steve Jobs never gave up on his ideas, you shouldn't give up on your English learning journey. Every bit of progress is something to be proud of.
I couldn't agree more, Adam. And don't forget to share what you've learned with others too. Whether it's practicing with a friend or teaching someone else a new word or phrase, sharing your knowledge not only helps others, but reinforces your own learning. And we'll be right here with you, providing new episodes to help you improve and continue your English learning journey. We're excited for the next episode, where we'll dive into another fascinating topic that will both inspire you and help you practice your English listening skills. So, keep an eye out for that. We've got so much more in store for you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We truly appreciate each and every one of you who listens to our podcast. It means the world to us that we get to share these stories, insights, and lessons with you. Whether you're listening during your commute, at home, or while doing something else, we hope that we've been able to add value to your day. So, as we wrap up, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, share it with your friends, and of course, keep practicing your English. You're doing great, and we're so proud of the progress you've made so far.
And remember, your journey to mastering English is just as important as the destination. Keep working on it, keep learning, and keep believing in yourself. We can't wait to see you in our next episode. We're going to explore new topics, hear more inspiring stories, and of course, help you improve your English along the way. Thanks again for listening, and we hope to see you next time. Until then, keep learning, stay curious, and never stop believing in the power of your dreams.
Goodbye for now, and take care. We look forward to talking with you again soon. Stay excited, stay motivated, and keep shining bright on your English learning journey. See you next time.